Would you believe me if I told you that an old lady with white hair, calloused hands, and a soft voice was capable of planning such a perfect, silent revenge, that even today, no one suspects a thing? Well, I did it. And now, at 82 years old, I can tell this story exactly as it happened. My name is Eleanor Thompson. I'm now over 82 years old. I've been through a lot in this life, but this was almost too much for a person to bear. And I'm going to tell you everything, just the way it happened. It was summer, one of those suffocating ones where the pavement seems to melt under your shoes. Our little town of Larkspur, deep in the heart of Kansas, looked just as it always had, frozen in time. White lace curtains in every window, the church bells ringing at 6 sharp, and the smell of apple pie drifting out of Mrs. Callahan's kitchen to doors down. It all seemed peaceful, but no one could see the storm that was building inside me. Back then, I was 41. My brown hair was usually twisted up in a messy bun, my hands always busy with housework, and my smile, people used to say it was the smile of a strong woman. But the truth, I no longer knew who I was. I'd been married to Harold for 19 years, and through all of them, I gave him everything I had: my youth, my strength, my loyalty. I kept the house, raised our 2 children, balanced the bills, trimmed the hedges. I was the kind of woman people don't notice until she's gone. And that's exactly what started to happen. At first, it was just the late nights. The car broke down. I had to stay late at work. I gave the new secretary a ride home. She lives far. But women know. We always know. I started seeing it. He no longer looked me in the eyes. His touch changed. And worst of all, his shirts began to smell like perfume. Cheap, sweet perfume that wasn't mine. I remember one night in particular. It was raining. One of those soft, steady rains that tap the roof like a lullaby but pierce your heart like a knife. I sat in the armchair by the living room window, the soft glow of the lamp by my side, working on a crochet piece. That's how I stayed sane, crocheting in silence. Harold came in and didn't even glance at me. Walked past me, left his wet shoes at the door, something he never did, and went upstairs. I stayed there, listening to the rain and feeling something inside me break. That night, I went to bed with a strange thought in my head. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something colder. Like something inside me had shattered so completely, there was no space left for pain. Just a hollow, icy emptiness. And deep in that emptiness, something began to grow. The idea that I would make him pay. Not with yelling, not with crying, not with a scandal. No, it had to be something he would never see coming. A slow burn, a quiet storm. But first, I had to become someone else. Asterisk, if Grandma's story is touching your heart, leave a like. It helps the channel so much and shows that you want to hear more true stories like this. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming stories. And if you know someone who needs to hear something like this, share it. Sometimes a simple story can change an entire day. Thank you for being here and listening with your heart. I think the hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself, it was the silence that came with it. The way Harold acted like nothing was wrong. Like I was invisible. Every dinner eaten in silence. Every kiss avoided. Every lie delivered with a calm, steady voice. That broke me far more than any shouting match ever could. I remember one afternoon I was folding laundry in the bedroom, and his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I never checked his things. Never. But that day, I did. Maybe it was instinct. Or maybe it was just the way the universe pushes us when we've been blind for too long. I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something deeper, resentment. I opened the messages and there it was. Her name was Debbie. The texts were flirtatious, juvenile, a woman half his age. Missed your touch today. Last night was perfect. Does she suspect anything? I didn't cry. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the phone still in my hand, and I stared at the wall. I didn't move for what felt like hours. There was no sobbing, just this cold, icy numbness spreading through my chest like winter moving through an empty house. I wish I could say I confronted him right then and there. That I stormed down the stairs, showed him the phone, screamed until my lungs gave out. But I didn't. I'm not that kind of woman. I'm the kind that waits, observes, plans. And that day, something inside me clicked into place. I didn't just want to leave him, I wanted him to feel everything I had felt. Slowly, quietly, deeply. I wanted him to drown in it. I spent weeks pretending everything was fine. I made his favorite meals. I kissed his cheek every morning. I made our bed. I even complimented him. And all the while, I was watching, learning, measuring every step he took, every lie he told, every careless smirk he wore, thinking he was getting away with it. What he didn't know was that I had begun writing things down. A little notebook I kept hidden in the drawer, beneath the sewing machine. Every appointment he claimed to have, every weekend trip with coworkers, every inconsistent story I documented everything. With dates, times, details. I was building my case, not for the police, but for something much more powerful. The slow erosion of his own comfort. One night, as we lay in bed and he snored beside me, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning above us and imagined my life without him. Not as a widow, not as a divorcee, but as a woman who took back the reins without ever raising her voice. A woman who turned her pain into something precise, calculated, and unforgettable. You see, the world never taught women like me how to scream. It taught us how to endure. But in that silence, we become dangerous. I wasn't just planning revenge, I was crafting it, stitch by stitch, like one of my crochet patterns. And by the time I was done, it would be so seamless, so clean. He'd never even see it coming. I think the most delicious part of silent revenge is watching the cracks form, little by little, while the person thinks the glass is still whole. That's exactly what I started doing with Harold, cracking his world. Quietly, elegantly. I started small. At first, I changed the way I looked at him. Not obviously, just enough that he felt it in the air. That moment when a man walks into a room and feels that the warmth is gone, but can't explain why. That's what I gave him. A house that looked the same but no longer felt like home. He began to notice the subtle things. I stopped asking about his day. I no longer made his coffee just the way he liked it, extra cream, one sugar. Instead, I made it too bitter. It's just the brand, I'd say. I replaced his favorite socks with the ones he hated. The others were too old. I'd smile. I took care of everything, but I stopped serving him. Emotionally, I was withdrawing piece by piece. He still got dinner. He still had clean clothes, but I no longer looked at him like I used to. And the truth is, I was starting to enjoy watching him squirm in his own house. That damn house I had built with my own two hands, my own energy, my own years. But I wasn't foolish. I knew he'd eventually try to win me back, not because he loved me, but because men like Harold don't like to lose control. And right on cue, he did. One night, he brought home flowers, cheap ones, from the gas station, as if petals could erase betrayal. I looked at them, nodded, and placed them on the counter without a word. Didn't even get a vase. He asked if I wanted to go to dinner that weekend. I agreed. But what he didn't know was that I had already hired someone to follow him. Yes, a private investigator, an old friend of my cousin, a retired cop who now did small jobs for cash. Quiet, discreet, thorough. He was already gathering evidence. For me, photos, texts, license plates, hotel receipts. I had a manila folder in my closet getting fatter by the week. I wasn't planning to take him to court. I didn't need a judge to validate my pain. No, my plan was different. I was going to ruin the life he built on top of my sacrifices, one brick at a time. And while all this was happening, I started doing something I hadn't done in decades. I started becoming me again. I went back to church. I joined the knitting circle. I signed up for a pottery class in the next town over. Harold didn't even notice. He was too busy lying. But others noticed. I remember a gentleman named Frank, widowed, polite, always held the door open at the community center. He said to me one morning, "Mrs. Thompson, you've got a different glow these days." And I did. Not because I was in love. Not because someone else had taken Harold's place. No, because I had taken my place back. I wasn't the doormat anymore. I wasn't the invisible wife behind the successful man. I was Eleanor again. And Harold, he was about to lose everything. Slowly, deliciously, completely. I always believed that destruction, when it's quiet, is the most beautiful kind. You don't scream. You don't throw things. You don't humiliate. You simply remove the beams holding up the roof and watch it collapse. That was my plan with Harold. By now, my folder of evidence was almost full. Photographs of him leaving a motel just outside of town. Screenshots of messages to Debbie, calling her his escape, his sunshine, his little secret. He didn't even try to hide it well. And that made it worse. Not just the betrayal, but the way he thought I was too dumb, too soft, too old to notice. But I noticed everything. He had no idea I was playing along. That dinner he invited me to, I wore red. Not for him, but because it made me feel powerful. I smiled, asked him about work, nodded at every lie he told me. I laughed at his dry jokes and toasted to us while watching him fall deeper into my trap. When the check came, I insisted on paying. That startled him. "You don't have to do that," he said, with a nervous laugh. I just looked at him and said, "You've carried me for long enough. Let me do something for you." He had no idea how true that was. I made copies of the evidence. One for me. One locked in a safety deposit box in town. One in a sealed envelope with a note that read, "Deliver only if anything happens to me." It was with my attorney, an old friend from high school who owed me a favor or two. Harold kept slipping deeper into his web of lies, thinking he was on top of the world. One afternoon, he came home late again. Meeting ran long. I asked him if he wanted a drink. He said yes. I poured him his favorite bourbon, 2 ice cubes. But I swapped the bourbon bottle with the cheaper one he hated. He took a sip, made a face, and I just smiled. "You must be tired," I said. "It's been a long week." He nodded, rubbing his temples. "You have no idea." Oh, but I did. The very next morning, I withdrew half of our joint savings. Clean, legal, discreet. I used it to buy something that had been my dream for years. A small cabin by the lake in Abilene. Quiet. Isolated. Mine? The deed was in my name. Only. No trace of Harold. No access. I told him I was volunteering more. Church programs, classes, outreach. He barely listened. Just don't forget about dinner, he'd say. Dinner. This man thought my worth was dinner. I started talking to our grown children more, inviting them for coffee, asking about their lives, laying the groundwork, not about the affair but about their fathers. Changes. His distractions. His forgetfulness. I didn't want to turn them against him. No. I wanted them to observe. I wanted them to see what I saw. On their own. I wanted Harold alone. You see, real revenge isn't about burning bridges. It's about guiding the person to the edge and letting them walk off it themselves. And Harold was nearly there. He just didn't know it yet. There's a moment in every game when the pieces are all in place, and you just need to make the final move. That's where I was. The board was set, and Harold was still playing checkers while I had already won the chess match. The funny part, he started thinking we were getting better. You've changed, he said one night. You're so much sweeter lately. I smiled and kissed his cheek. I guess I'm learning to let go, I said. And I was. Letting go of the woman who once begged for his attention. Letting go of the tears I cried alone in the kitchen. Letting go of the fear that he'd break me. He couldn't anymore. I had already rebuilt myself with stronger material. But it was time. I planned it all with precision. It started with the anniversary, 20 years. A lifetime. A lie. He didn't even remember it. Not until the day before, when our daughter Mary posted an old photo of us on social media with the caption, "Happy 20th, Mom and Dad." That night, Harold panicked. He came home with roses overcompensating. "Let's go somewhere this weekend," he said. "Let's celebrate, just the two of us." Perfect. I agreed. I booked the trip myself. A cozy lodge near the lake. A romantic setup. But here's the catch: I invited Debbie too. Not as me. Of course. I used a fake name and an email address I created months earlier. I posed as a travel agent with a surprise getaway package. Something exclusive, secret, spontaneous. Just for lovers who wanted a discreet escape. I knew exactly how to bait her flattery, mystery, and the promise of Harold alone. She accepted. The lodge had 2 entrances, 2 wings. I arranged the rooms. I even left a note at reception to send champagne to both suites at the same time. When we arrived, Harold was nervous. He thought he was in control, making up for lost time. We walked in, and I acted excited. "This place is beautiful," I said, holding his hand. Meanwhile, I knew she was just 1 hallway away. I gave it 20 minutes. Then, I told him I forgot my earrings in the car and walked out. Calmly, slowly, I got into my car and drove home. Alone, free, done. Meanwhile, Debbie walked into the main lounge, asking for Mr. Blake, the alias he used with her, right in front of the staff, right in front of the guests. Confused glances, murmurs. Harold standing there with a stunned look on his face, realizing too late. The trap had closed by the time he got home. The locks had been changed. My attorney sent him a letter the same day with copies of everything: photos, texts, receipts, the hotel confrontation. I didn't say a word. Not one. He called dozens of times, left voicemails begging to explain, to apologize. I deleted them all, because that day, Harold didn't just lose his wife. He lost the illusion of power he had clung to for decades. And me? I had never felt more alive. The morning after I left Harold at the lodge, I woke up to something I hadn't felt in decades. Silence. Not the heavy kind. Not the silence of tension, or avoidance, or heartbreak. It was light, clean, free. I sat by the window in my little kitchen, just me and the morning sun. I brewed my coffee slowly, strong and black, just the way I liked it, not the way Harold always wanted it. For the first time in 20 years, I didn't have to think about his preferences. I didn't have to serve anyone. I drank that coffee like it was a celebration. And in a way, it was. Not of revenge, but of resurrection. He called all day, dozens of times. Texts, emails. I can explain. Please come back. Let's talk. There was nothing to explain. I had given him to decades of loyalty. He had thrown it away for weekend fantasies and flattery. And now, I had thrown him out of my story. I took the day to do small things that most people would find meaningless, but to me, they were symbols of my freedom. I rearranged the living room. I took down our wedding photo. I replaced it with a painting of sunflowers I had picked up at a craft fair 5 years ago, one he never liked. Said it was too bright. Now, that brightness filled the room. That evening, I cooked just for myself. Baked salmon, with lemon and herbs from my own garden. I poured a glass of wine, lit a candle, and ate slowly, with music playing in the background. Not jazz he hated. Jazz. I loved jazz. Every moment that passed was a reclaiming of self. Later that week, I went to the cabin I'd bought in Abilene. It was small, just 2 bedrooms, a fireplace, and a wraparound porch that looked out onto the water. When I opened the door, the smell of fresh pine wood and new beginnings hit me like a blessing. I stood in the middle of that empty space and cried. Not from pain, from relief. That cabin wasn't just real estate. It was the version of my soul I had buried for years. Quiet, strong, completely mine. Over the next few weeks, the town buzzed with whispers. People noticed Harold wasn't around anymore. Some speculated. Others approached me gently, trying to fish for details. I gave none. People who need drama get bored when you give them dignity instead. What shocked me the most was how many women came up to me, quietly, at church, at the store, even at the post office, saying things like, "You were brave," or "I always knew you had more in you," or simply, "Thank you." Apparently, I wasn't alone. So many of us suffer in silence, trapped behind smiles and casseroles, keeping our homes together while we fall apart inside. But my silence had become my power. My stillness had become my armor. And Harold, he moved in with a friend to towns over. Debbie never spoke to him again after the lodge scene. He had traded a lifetime partner for a temporary thrill, and ended up with nothing. Me, I had finally started living. It's strange how, after a lifetime of being quiet, once you find your voice, it echoes in places you never expected. That's what started happening after Harold was gone. At first, I thought I'd enjoy my peace and solitude. Just me, my cabin, my garden, and the rhythm of a life no longer dictated by someone else's wants. And for a while, that was enough. But something unexpected happened. Women started coming to me. It began with Ruth, a widow in her late 60s. We ran into each other at the farmer's market. She held my hand and whispered, "What you did. I only wish I had done the same when I had the chance." Then came Linda, one of the younger ladies from church. She had always seemed so confident, so in control. But behind her mascara and polite smiles was a woman exhausted by a loveless marriage. One Sunday, after service, she stayed behind. "How did you know when it was time to stop pretending?" she asked me. I didn't give her a sermon. I didn't give her advice. I just told her the truth. I stopped the moment I realized he didn't see me anymore. I started living the moment I saw myself again. That answer spread faster than gossip ever could. I never intended to become a symbol. I'm not a hero. I'm just an old woman who had enough. But maybe that's what makes the story matter. I began hosting small gatherings at the cabin. Nothing fancy, just a few chairs on the porch, a pot of tea, maybe a pie cooling on the windowsill. Women came, one by one, and we talked. No shame, no filters. We cried. We laughed. We remembered who we used to be. It wasn't therapy. It wasn't a club. It was a return to something older, deeper, like the way our grandmothers used to gather and share wisdom through stories and recipes. Except this time, we were the grandmothers, and the wisdom was survival. I never said Harold's name, not once. He didn't deserve space in my news story. But the lesson he left behind, that I shared freely. I told them how I waited, how I studied, how I acted without noise, without violence, and how I walked away without looking back. And they listened, not because my story was exceptional, but because it was familiar. Too many women live in quiet suffering, thinking their strength is measured by how much they can endure. But I had learned that real strength is knowing when to walk away and doing it with grace. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the lake, I sat on my porch with 3 women beside me. We were sipping peach tea, and the wind was soft. Ruth turned to me and said, "You should write a book, Eleanor." I smiled. "No need. I'm telling it right now. And someone, somewhere, is listening. Because if my voice, this old, weathered, steady voice, can wake even one woman from a silent life, then it was all worth it." It had been months since I'd last seen Harold. He had stopped calling eventually, stopped trying to explain, I suppose. Reality finally settled in the same way morning fog lifts slowly off the lake. But one Saturday afternoon, as I was pruning my tomato plants, I heard a car pulling up the gravel path to the cabin. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked to the front porch. It was him. Older, heavier, eyes tired. He stood beside his car, holding nothing but his hat in his hands like a boy caught stealing apples. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. The silence between us filled with 1,000 memories, 1,000 wounds, and 1,000 truths that no longer needed to be spoken. May I just talk for a minute?" he asked, his voice quieter than I remembered. I could have said no. I would have been right to say no, but I didn't. I nodded and walked inside, leaving the door open. I didn't offer him coffee. I didn't invite him to sit. I simply stood by the counter, watching him take cautious steps into the life he no longer belonged to. He looked around, saw the changes, the painting, the way the space breathed without him. "I've been thinking," he started, "about everything, about how badly I stop," I said gently, not coldly, just firm. He paused, swallowing hard. "I didn't bring you here to beg," I continued, "and I don't need an apology you should have made years ago. I let all that go the moment I walked away." He looked down, nodding slowly. I didn't realize what I had until." "You didn't realize I was a person," I said. "You thought I was furniture, something reliable, silent, always in place." until I moved. He blinked. That hit him. I came to say thank you, he said finally. Not to win you back. Just to say, I see it now. Too late, I know. But I see it. I studied him for a moment. Not the man he once was. Not the man who betrayed me. Just a man, flawed, aging, regretful, and in that moment, I felt something unexpected, not anger, not victory, compassion, because forgiveness isn't always for the other person. Sometimes, it's for ourselves, so we don't carry their darkness inside us, so we can keep walking light. I forgive you, Harold, I said. His eyes filled with tears. But forgiveness doesn't mean return, I added. It means release. And I've already set myself free. He nodded, his shoulders falling. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He just said, thank you, and walked out the door. I watched him drive away, the dust rising behind his car like the last trace of a past finally gone. I closed the door, not with finality but with peace, because the last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. And I was whole. After Harold left that day, I didn't cry. I didn't feel empty, or victorious, or sad. I just felt still. The kind of stillness that only comes after a long, hard storm finally passes. That quiet peace where everything smells fresh, like rain and earth, and you know deep down, you survived. From that point forward, everything I did came from a place of clarity. I stopped doing things out of duty. I did them because I wanted to. I woke up earlier, not to serve anyone, but to sit on the porch and listen to the wind in the trees. I wore perfume again. I bought lipstick in a bold berry color. I cut my hair short, something Harold always hated. But when I looked in the mirror, I saw me. Not the version that had to please, or accommodate, or disappear behind someone else's story. I saw Eleanor, and she was radiant. I joined a local storytelling group. Just once a month, we'd gather in the old library room downtown. Just a few chairs, a circle, and our voices. At first, I just listened. The others told their tales. Of grief, of raising children, of surviving cancer, of losing love. Then, one evening, someone asked, Eleanor, what's your story? And for the first time, I spoke it aloud. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't rush. I just told it the way it happened, with honesty and pain and strength. When I finished, the room was silent. Then came the tears. The nods, the quiet yeses from women who knew that kind of ache too well. A younger woman approached me afterward. You don't know what you've just given me, she said. I've been so afraid to leave, afraid to start again. But now, you're not too late, I told her. You're just early to yourself. That phrase stayed with her. She printed it and framed it on her kitchen wall. I know because she sent me a photo. And from there, things grew. I was invited to speak at a women's circle in the next county, then a church group, then a small podcast hosted by a young woman who had left an emotionally abusive relationship and wanted to spotlight older women's wisdom. They didn't call me Eleanor. They started calling me the quiet fire, and I understood why. Because I didn't burn in rage. I burned in resolve. I didn't explode. I transformed. I didn't raise my voice, but I reclaimed my name, and people noticed, not because I became someone new, but because I returned to the woman I had always been, before the world tried to shrink me. And in that return, I became unstoppable. I never imagined that at 82 years old, I'd feel more alive than I did at 42, but here I am, People think life ends after betrayal. That after a certain age, especially for women, all that's left is to settle, to shrink, to stay quiet. But they're wrong. So wrong. Because I'm living proof that it's never too late to choose yourself. My story isn't just about a man who broke vows. It's not about revenge, or even justice. It's about memory, identity, strength. It's about remembering the girl I once was, the one who used to dance barefoot in the kitchen, who dreamed of writing stories, who loved to laugh too loudly and hated ironing shirts. That girl didn't die when I got married. She didn't disappear the first time Harold lied. She didn't vanish after years of being overlooked. She was just waiting, quiet, patient, until the day I was ready to bring her back home. And when I did, oh, what a reunion it was. Now, my days are mine. I plant flowers without asking. I write in a notebook every morning, just to hear my own thoughts again. I bake pies not because someone expects them, but because the smell of cinnamon and crust makes me feel like I'm 10 years old again, in my grandmother's kitchen. And sometimes, when the wind is right and the lake is still, I close my eyes and whisper, "Thank you, Eleanor, for coming back." I know that somewhere out there, another woman is listening. Maybe she's 38. Maybe she's 62. Maybe she's just turned 75 and thinks it's too late to start over. It's not. You are not your pain. You are not the years you lost trying to be small enough for someone else's comfort. You are not the silence you were forced to swallow. You are a fire, even if it's quiet, especially if it's quiet. And when you finally choose yourself, you don't just walk away from the person who hurt you. You run toward the woman you were always meant to become. So if you're still here, listening to this old voice of mine, I'll leave you with this. You are not too old. You are not too late. You are just on time for you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for letting me finally tell my story.